How important is money to you over something like purpose?
Money's an important part because it's kind of like the scorecard of the game, right? And the game only gets played if the money's flowing around. So, it's kind of like how important's the ball and the scoreboard to football. Well, if there's no ball, you can't really play the game, and if there's no scoreboard, there's no point to playing the game, right? So it's a hugely important part.
Daniel Priestley, I'm delighted to have you on the show, the Purpose-Led Leadership Podcast. We've connected recently on a couple of different platforms, actually, through Rebecca, your colleague.
Yeah.
Thrilled to have you on. For those that don't know, tell us what you're doing now.
So I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Dent Global, which is a business accelerator company. We've got offices in the UK, Australia, and Canada. And we work with like 3,500 companies around the world. We've taken them through a process called the Key Person of Influence program, which has been great. The way we built that business is I wrote a book called Key Person of Influence. And in the book, I had what's called an online scorecard or a quiz, which tests people whether they've got the skills of influence. And this was a game changer. It was 90,000 people took the quiz, and that generated tens of millions worth of sales. And it was pretty simple. We give away the book for free. People read the book. They then take the quiz, and the quiz gets people to talk to our team, and our team talk about what we do, and we grew the business. So we scaled the business off the back of this very simple formula of getting people to take an online quiz.
Yeah.
And when I say an online quiz, it's professionalized. It's not NAF. It's not like a which Disney princess are you or anything like that. It's an online assessment, right?
Right.
That type of thing. Anyway, a lot of our clients who are quite savvy said, hey, I really like the way you got me onto this. I want one of these scorecards. I want one of these quizzes assessments.
Yeah.
So we spun out a new business over the pandemic called Score App, and that is the platform. It's the software for building an online assessment. And this has just been an amazing, fun, cool business. I've always been in services, business services and people businesses. And then this was my first go at a software business. And we've just grown exponential. So we've got 2,500 clients in the last couple of years. We've got a new book coming out called Scorecard Marketing, which explains how to do it. We've got some great corporates who are using it internally with their team. We've got people using it to benchmark performance in the NHS. We've got people using it to generate leads. We've got coaches and consultants, like one-person businesses who have transformed their business. We now get emails pretty much every day saying, this is my number one lead generation. This is the cornerstone of my business. Several coaches, consultants have replaced their website with a scorecard instead. So that's it. On one hand, I've got a group of companies, which is the growth services and accelerator business.
Yeah.
And then there's the software business.
That's really interesting because there's a lot of kind of these engagement surveys and quizzes and stuff like that. So, I mean, how did you cut through the noise? What's different about what you're doing, and how did you cut through that noise?
With our one or with the software?
Well, both really.
Yeah. So with our one, I think we had some good content with the book. People were enjoying that, and we had some good videos and blogs, and basically all roads led to the scorecard. So if you read a blog, take the scorecard. If you read the book, take the scorecard. If you attended one of our events, take the scorecard. You bought a ticket, come and get the scorecard. Yeah. So we kind of made that a real cornerstone. I'll give you a bit of background as well on where that idea came from. In 2007-8, Obama did his campaign, and he was really engaging people on social media. Yeah. And at that time, it was a turning point for social media. Social media was like a thing that kids did or teenagers did or young people did. And then Obama comes along, and everyone widely credited that him using social media was the tool that got him the presidency. And I clocked this idea that the presidential election is a really good place to learn marketing trends and to see what marketing works.
Sure.
So in 2016, I was watching this idea of how they win the Trump campaign and the Brexit campaign, and out comes this idea called Cambridge Analytica. And when they unpacked how they did it, they got people to answer a quiz.
Sure.
And then they collected all that data.
Yes.
And then they remarketed to people based on how they answered the questions.
Because I think people like pressing buttons on LinkedIn, and when you do a poll, they go crazy, don't they?
They love it. right? It's something to engage in.
Yeah.
And so I realized that data analytics was going to be the big next trend. That was the next social media. So social media's hit the top of its S curve. It's mature. It's adopted. But I thought, what's the next big trend? And I thought, well, data analytics is going to be the next big trend. And that rung true in our business because our business was built off the back of collecting data, deep data, important data, and responding to people based on the data. So what we did is we just put time and energy and effort into giving people good custom results. So based on how you answer the questions, you get a nice customized PDF report, and it tells you these are the things you should do. So start, it's almost like because of what you said on the questions, go start here.
Right. So it gives them a pointer as to be an entrepreneur or what type of personality they have as well, or
it's not so much personality test, although that is a perfect example of how this works.
Right.
So if ever anyone's taken a personality test online,
yeah,
it says, well, you're an introvert or an extrovert, or you're a high frequency thinker, or you're a details person.
Yeah.
And then it says you should focus on, having this kind of a career, or you should focus on complementing your strengths with these strengths.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the kind of system of an assessment that then gives you custom results.
Sure. I want to delve into that a bit more deeper and also understand sort of the scale of your businesses. I know you're kind of a serial entrepreneur, a number of businesses, but before we could go into that, I ask all my guests the same thing. I want to find out more about you as a person, as a human being, Daniel. So tell the audience a bit of a journey from since school to now.
So I grew up on the Sunshine Coast, which is a beautiful beach community in Australia. And strangely, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I worked for this guy who owned 6 McDonald's franchises, and I saw him owning McDonald's and being an entrepreneur. And I discovered this book called The E-Myth, and I read this, and I discovered this guy, Tony Robbins, and kind of all of that got mixed into a bucket, this kind of Tony Robbins experience, the Randy, the McDonald's owner, and E-Myth, the system. I started this idea that maybe I would be an entrepreneur and that could be how I would make my life and my lifestyle. And there was a few family friends who owned businesses that I saw, and I kind of built more and more desire for this. So I left school, went to university, discovered that none of the university lecturers had a business or had ever had a business.
Yeah.
And I was disappointed. So I quit and I joined a startup, and I became employee number 3. We didn't have a bank account and business name. We had nothing really. Just this guy who had left his previous company. He had a personal list of 15,000 names. And we were starting a new business with 15,000 names on a database. And that was it. And I went from complete standing start to 6 million of revenue and 60 people on a team.
Wow.
And this guy, I was 19 to age 21, so I did 2 years with John.
Yeah.
And I just had this amazing experience of going from a startup. So it was the dream experience, right? For someone who wanted to be an entrepreneur, to go through a fast growth business was just awesome.
Just give us a headline as to how you did that. Because you're 19, with the greatest respect, none of us really know much about business or life, do we?
I was complete numpty. But John took me under his wing, and he saw me as what I would today call a Swiss Army knife. And I've had plenty of Swiss Army knives in my life now. So I like to keep a good Swiss Army knife around.
Sure.
So a Swiss Army knife is someone who can do 25 things badly. So I was John's Swiss Army knife. So if he needed me to fold letters and put them in envelopes and to take them to the mailbox, I would do that. If he needed me to get on the phone and make 70 phone attempts a day and make some cold calls, I would do that. If he needed me to contact the newspaper and get a quote for a quarter-page ad in the newspaper, I'd do that.
Yeah.
So he would just have me thrown at whatever was the issue of the day.
Sure.
And
to sweep up the stuff.
Yeah, I was a fixer. But I was a dumb 19 to no skills, just passionate, just excited, passionate. So John would just give me all these things. And the other thing too is he would get me to sit in on meetings. So I'm sitting there while we're hiring people, and I'm sitting there while we're coming up with marketing campaigns, and while we're writing emails, writing newsletters and all that sort of stuff. And I'm touring with him, and I'm picking him up from the airport, and I'm dropping him off at the airport, and I'm working out of his house, right? So I get to his house at 8:30 in the morning and leave at 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. So I'm seeing how he runs his life. and all of that stuff. So basically, I get this apprenticeship. It's an incredible apprenticeship
Yeah, of
money
course.
can't buy. 21 years old, I go to John and I say, can I get shares in the business? And he says, no, it's too late for that. If you want shares in the business, you need to go start your own business. So I did. I quit. I quit and I started my own company in Australia. It became a very fast growth business. I applied everything that I'd learned from John. I copied what I'd seen. We went from 0 to 10 million in the first 3 years and built an amazing team of 25-year-olds, work hard, play hard culture.
Yeah.
We all operated out of a massive 7-bedroom home that we turned into offices.
Is this all kind of like sort of what you would say inbound marketing growth, or how did you build it? Was it outbound sales?
Lots of ads.
Right.
We're an ads business.
Right.
So the first business was event marketing and management, and we would specialize in roadshows and tours.
Okay.
So let's say you wanted to roll out a new franchise, you would hire my firm and we would roll you out event marketing. So we would do intro presentations.
Okay.
And our specialty was 2-hour intros, an introduction to whatever, right? So we did introductions to new bedding. We did introductions to financial planning. We did introductions to software companies. We did introductions to franchises. Now, the genius of it was that I would cut a deal where I would take personal risk of running the costs of running this in exchange for the back-end sales.
Got you.
So one of our biggest moves was when we did a deal with a franchise company and we would get 20% of every franchise fee.
Got you.
Now those were 60 grand franchise fees and we were getting 12 grand every time we sold one.
Right.
And we'd get part of the costs covered. And basically that was a $10 million home run in 1 year. And we were earned 2 million in fees off the back of that with most costs covered. So that was kind of what it built up to.
So at 21, you asked for shares, set up your business. In 3 years, got that to 10 million. So you're sort of mid-20s now. What happened next?
Had a big falling out with one of our partners, which they were going to acquire us, and we got into a fight during the whole negotiation time, and they threw a tantrum, I threw a tantrum, and ended up kind of parting ways. And what would have been a massive, life-changing deal fell apart for both, right? So they missed out and we missed out.
It's often the case when you're presented with an offer or a number, but then the reality of it is different, isn't it? So give us a bit more detail on that.
Well, I think when two parties come together, they see the synergies and their big picture expand the pie mindset kicks in. Yeah. And then when they start to enroll their teams and start to enroll all the people who need to be enrolled in the deal, a lot of those people are more detail people and nitpicking kind of people. So you can get a situation like mine where two CEOs get together and go, our companies would be great together. Let's do the deal. Yeah. Headline number, headline deal. We're excited. We're going to create great wealth.
Sure.
And then you get a prickly CFO who has a board seat and who has and who is a carve the pie, not expand the pie kind of mindset. Yeah. And they come in and they start picking over every detail and then start negotiating hardball and basically kill the deal. And it happens all the time.
I think that's why it's difficult sometimes if you do a deal and you stay on as a CEO, to expect the culture to be the same it's a completely different animal, and rightly so. The investor or the buyer wants their pound of flesh, but also I think there should be a consideration around normally the culture is responsible for the success of the profit of the business as well, and it's a fine line sometimes, isn't it? Yeah,
there is, and if you're buying hard assets like property, then you can have nasty negotiations and it doesn't impact the property. But if you're buying a business that is mostly intangible, if you have horrible negotiations and you kill the chemistry, then you're left with two businesses that don't want to get along. And that's where we were headed. So I called the deal off 2 days before Christmas.
How much did you walk away from potentially?
Like millions, tens of well into the 8 figures.
And that's because it didn't sit right with you, basically, yeah?
I had a business coach at the time who talked about this concept of awareness and mind chatter, tummy chatter, and intuition. And he basically said, you already know it's going to happen. Yeah. Right? You know this isn't going to work. It's not going to play out. And I was just young, right? So
Yeah.
okay, I would have handled things very differently. I would have today. I'd have the skills to get that back on board.
Sure.
And I would easily have gotten that back on board, right? And I would have structured it. I would have structured a deal that worked and de-risked it for the CFO and all that sort of stuff. Youth and inexperience, basically, I just threw a tantrum. They threw a tantrum, and we threw a tantrum, and basically we just let it descend real fast. They also pulled a very, very nasty negotiating move.
I mean, I might be wrong in this, but I think you're a multimillionaire, or you're certainly a millionaire.
Doing okay, yeah.
Yeah, you're doing well. How important is money to you over something like purpose?
Money's an important part because it's kind of like the scorecard of the game, right? And the game only gets played if the money's flowing around. So, it's kind of like how important's the ball and the scoreboard to football. Well, if there's no ball, you can't really play the game, and if there's no scoreboard, there's no point to playing the game, right? So it's a hugely important part. But then once you assume that it is an important part, that's not what keeps a team together. If you use a football example, the chemistry of the team, the sporting culture, the desire to work together as a team, the vision of where you're going to get to as a team.
Absolutely.
All of that is far more important, and purely and simply just having a ball and a scorecard doesn't actually get you anywhere.
Totally.
So, you then have to execute the skills. So, I mean, it's very easy for someone like myself to say money's not that important. Well, okay, good for you. Now you've got some, but yeah, look, it's never actually, to be honest, it's never actually been that important, which is why I walked away from the deal.
Sure.
I was really interested in the vision of the company when I started working with them back in the day.
Absolutely.
And then I knew that was all unraveling. So it was actually a surprisingly easy decision to just say, this isn't going to work and we're not going to do the deal. And
that really resonates with me, because I'm a business coach and I'm asked by my clients to come in and scale the business from X to Y. And I always ask why. Before I do any of that kind of operational stuff, I always try and get that vision pinned down. But it shouldn't just be the leader's vision. It should be like an our vision thing, isn't it? And when you've got that collective kind of goal, I mean, people think this is fluffy. It's not.
No,
it's one of the most important things.
It's the first question. What's the point? Right? What's the point?
Yeah.
So, and also, there's kind of two kinds of businesses. There's the lifestyle business, fun, freedom, flexibility, small team.
Yeah.
We work hard, we play hard, we love each other. But that goes up to about 12 people.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
So you can have a core team of about 12 that kind of work that way. And you can have some consultants around it, and you can have some extension on the team. But there's about a core team of 8 to 12 people, and you can have the fun, freedom, flexibility. And then once you decide to go past that, it's not going to be fun again until there's about 40 or 50 people.
Absolutely.
So you're going to have CEO, CTO, COO, CFO, CMO, and that's going to be dead weight sitting on top of a team of people who have to pick up phones and do stuff.
And hopefully some accountability as well.
Right? So now the weight of that executive team, the minimum team size that can support that weight's like 40 people.
Sure.
There are people who actually pick up phones and do stuff. And if you don't have 40 people picking up the phone and making things happen, then the executive team is too heavy.
Absolutely.
So until such time as you get to that, so between 12 and 40,
I totally agree.
You're too big to be small and too small to be big.
I think a lot of businesses have, to refer to your point, have too many Swiss Army knives, where the CFO's putting an IT lead in a computer, or he's doing something else that's not even related to finance, and they're doing the 25 things badly. And I think what I tend to do is, what is your role? What are your strengths? Stay in your lane.
Well, that's the big switch, and that's why you asked the question why, because the little team of generalists, 8 to 12 people who love each other and will happily get down on the floor and rewire the server wire thing, and they'll watch a YouTube video and figure out how to do it.
Or clap afterwards.
Yeah, that's all good if you're up to like 10 people doing 1 or 2 million.
Yeah.
But, a team of generalists gets the first million, and a team of specialists gets to 10 million. But you need everyone in a really talent specialized role once you hit a certain point. But the thing most people don't realize is that lovely company that was fun, freedom, flexibility based, it turns into performance excellence.
Sure.
A very different culture.
Sure.
And if you don't want that, and if you don't have a real reason why,
It's an issue.
just stay at 10 people. Like, just enjoy being at 10 people. Do not go and try and go to this next jump.
Yes.
Because, people think it's going to be more of the same. It's not going to be more of the same.
Completely different landscape, right?
So if someone says, oh, we've had a great time getting to 1.2 million pounds, we're pulling 300 grand profit out, everyone loves the business. We go out every night, every Friday afternoon, we take the afternoon off, we go have pizza together as a team and all that stuff. And you say, well, this has been so fun.
Yeah.
We should do 10 times this. And it's like, it's not going to be like this any
It is
longer.
the why. I mean, a lot of the CEOs that I deal with or have dealt with in the past, they don't necessarily even know why they're doing what they're doing. They say, oh, I want to get it to, we're at 5 million now, let's get to 30 million. Why?
Why?
Why is 30 million an important number to you? But also, if you are serious about that, I think that if you ask a CEO one question 6 months ago, he'll have a different answer to what it is now. So some people say, oh, I don't want to exit, I don't want to go through that. And 6 months later, they completely change. So I think it's really important to get yourself in that kind of build and sell exit mindset anyway to a degree, because you just don't know what's around the corner.
I think you've got to separate the two. So the business itself as an entity needs its own why. It needs its own vision. It needs its own reason for existing. And that reason won't change when it's sold. So it will continue on with an amazing purpose in the world, and everyone who works there will still have that purpose.
Yeah.
And you might continue to work there for a while and still have that purpose. But then you've got your own purpose. And most people don't realize, but your own why changes with kids. So,
Of course.
you get married and have kids, whatever you went into your marriage and bachelordom thinking was your why is no longer your why. That's
true.
That's over. That's dead. So, there are really, I've helped some people exit, and I said, why do you want to sell the business? It's going really well. And they said, well, I got family. And I go, okay, I totally get that. And it's a decision where you say, if I could take £9 million off the table right now and set my family up for life, we own a big family, we've got a big family home, and we've got some properties, and I've got, let's say you got 3 kids and you've got a couple of properties for each of the kids, right? And you say, that's now locked away. It's pretty selfish to say, no, I'll just keep risking it all on the growth of the business. Yeah. Now, you might not have thought about that when you're a bachelor.
No.
So,
but also as well, like a CEO can set up a business and get to 10 people, but it's a completely different level of skill set and capability when you've got 50 people. So sometimes the founder isn't the best CEO, right?
Yeah. Sometimes you might have a desire. I might have a desire to play at Wimbledon. I don't know that I've got the talent.
Yeah. Okay, so let's continue this then. So, sort of, what happened next in this wonderful journey of yours?
So, basically, at the exact same moment that as is often the case, at the exact same moment that I was ending one relationship and having a falling out, a mentor of mine said, "Hey, I've got this really great company and this product that I'm working with, and we would love to do a launch in London. And you're really good at doing launches. You do these rollout events and you do these kind of speakers and tours and all that.
Yeah.
Do you think you could do London?" And I'm like, I've never been above the equator. Like I've only been out of the country once or twice.
Wow.
So I'd been doing Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne extensively, but I'd done one little trip to New Zealand and one little trip to Vanuatu and a trip to Bali. And I'd never been above the equator. And he says, well, how hard could it be? Just, it's 60 million people over there and they're all in like a tiny little island. Like, how hard would it be? So just, he encouraged me. He's like, just go to London and do our launch, right?
Right.
So, so I signed a deal, and I couldn't even spell Wales at the time. I think I spelt it like as in the fish.
Yeah, with a H or something, yeah.
So I remember writing out this contract and England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales,
right. Yeah.
Anyway, so find myself launching a new business in London in 2006, and we smashed it. We basically signed up several international companies to launch in London. We signed deals with different companies. We got great promotional agreements with them.
Yep.
We took all the learnings from the first 5 years and put it into our agreements going into London. Launched in London, did £4 million in the first year. At the end of year one, we did this amazing, massive event over at London Palladium Theatre. We hired the venue for like 30 grand for the day, and
Nice.
2,000 people show up. We make like £600,000 in the following week.
As you do.
Yeah, and I'm still only like 27 at this point.
Wow.
So
Fair play to you.
yeah, so it was like one of these wild things to arrive in a place not knowing anybody, and then in 1 year later to be standing on stage at the Palladium Theatre
Yeah.
with 2,000 people in the audience.
I mean, what strikes me with you, we're only up to age 27. You've had 3 or 4 kind of big ticket events, and it's all gone very well and very swimmingly. And I built a business to sort of 30 million quid at the age of 29, and I have to admit, it did get to me a little bit. It made me a little bit big-headed. How did you keep a level head?
I didn't, I was big-headed. Like a 20-year-old male,
Yeah.
20-something-year-old males. We're ridiculous at that age. We've not had proper
Yeah.
blood noses. We think we walk on water because, just the arrogance and the cockiness of not knowing what it's like to have a family and all of those things. When you're a 20-something-year-old full of testosterone,
Yeah.
you can go kick doors down 12-hour days and
Totally.
think nothing of it. You can recruit people and bring them onto teams. You can be doing breakfast meetings, lunch meetings, dinner meetings, weekends. You jump on a plane when you want to jump on a plane.
Yeah.
The way I lived at that time was we'd do 60 hours in a week and then jump on a plane and go and spend a weekend in Mallorca.
Sure.
And then jump back and start all again on Monday morning.
Sounds glamorous, but actually what I found was I wasn't really in tune with myself. I had different girlfriends, relationships were poor. It wasn't until I kind of had children that I sort of changed my mindset. What about you?
Oh, same. Having a stable relationship and having kids changed absolutely everything. It's an empathy that you get with people. You suddenly have a better understanding of what life's really about, what really brings fulfillment, what balance is. Like I had zero balance in my life.
Yes.
I was very one-dimensional.
Yes, absolutely. That resonates. Because what I found as well, I used to sort of spend 99.9% of my time, energy on work, and I used to be a boring fucker because ask me anything, it'll be about work, or send emails at 3 o'clock in the morning. I had nothing else going on in my life.
I used to also fall asleep at parties. I'd be at a party and I'd just be off in the corner having a nap.
Yeah.
Because I'd worked so hard.
But having a wife or having kids, what it did do, it kind of realigned my thinking about, actually, I can spend less time on the business and more time into my relationships, my personal development, and I can execute better in the business because of that.
Yeah.
And I think it can't, sometimes stepping away and realizing, why am I doing this in the first place? And actually, I asked myself the question, it's actually to spend more time with my children. So why am I spending all my time in work?
Yeah. And the constraint forces you to only do the stuff that really matters, not the stuff it's not the stuff you can do, it's the stuff you should be doing. And I think, just it gives you a purpose, gives you a why. The why question becomes very easy personally once your family, is there, because it's the default.
Talk to us about, because we talked about all the nice glamorous stuff. We've touched on some of the kind of tricky bits, but let's go a bit deeper around anxiety, adversity, mental health, all that kind of stuff. What have you struggled with?
I've always been a very chipper, positive person, but that means that a lot of people come to me with their problems, and for some reason, for a long time, people come to me when they at the point where they're breaking down and lean on me for stuff. So that's been for all through my 20s, that was a huge problem, that I would have a lot of people leaning on me financially and emotionally and all of those sorts of things. And most people just didn't. I also give off a very positive vibe, and most people didn't realize unbelievable stress and pressure that we were juggling with. I was almost always running my businesses using credit cards, and at the end of the month you got to clear the credit cards. And, sometimes that would be 75,000 on a credit card. And these were the types of credit cards that you had to clear them. They weren't make a minimum payment credit cards. They were, you got to clear them. Payroll and, just so many times we just scrape through.
Yeah. I think this is not a sexist thing, but it's a known fact that men, I'm 45. I think you're probably a little bit younger.
41,
than me.
yeah.
Yeah, but of our age, it's high suicide rates, and I think particularly, it doesn't matter if you're CEO or not, but I think that we're told not to necessarily talk about it and show emotion, and I think it can be a very lonely place as a CEO or solopreneur when you got that level of responsibility, because you don't show any weakness, right? So how did you have people around you?
Yeah, I joined a group called Entrepreneurs Org, and they put you into a thing called a forum, and that was really good. I did that when I was about 24.
Well, that's good.
And every month we meet up, and basically you realize they're all fucked as well. So we all get together and we all talk it out, and we you know, you've got 5 or 6 people who are in the same position as you are, and they're all of us are looking good to our peers or to our teams, but also dealing with the tough stuff. The problem with having a team is that you only, at a certain size, you only really find yourself dealing with the annoying stuff. All the fun stuff and easy stuff's outsourced.
Yeah.
You know, so you end up basically all the difficult decisions come to your part of the business, and you have to create certainty for others while you've got none for yourself. So, for example, when you're leading a team meeting, you've got to give them, make sure they've got a plan and that they understand the pitch and they've got clarity and they understand exactly what needs to be done this week. And you're sitting there going, I have no idea how I'm going to solve my problems.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there going, well, sometimes you might be leading a team meeting and you're going, we're having a massive falling out with this particular company that we're partnering with, but I have to make sure they're comfortable and happy while I sorting out this thing that, you know, I would love to take these guys and tell them to take a walk, but I've got to have these guys out there selling. So that stuff happens, you know, so it's really that kind of dichotomy of being pulled in 2 directions.
Yeah.
So I was very lucky to have this forum that we just had a monthly meeting, and it also provided context that all these people who look good, look amazing, are actually struggling, and they're
like swans, you know, gracefully cruising on the river. Underneath, they're like paddling like crazy, right?
Yeah, they're dealing with stuff, and so that was pretty good. But mind you, I mean, I had all sorts of low moments. You know, the global financial crisis was horrific. You know, I went from 4 million down to 400,000 in 1 year. Most of that 400,000 was collections. Everyone I knew was going bust.
Yeah.
We didn't know how long it was going to last. Everyone was saying this is going to be a 3, 4, 5 year thing. I had to fire 17 of my team members.
Wow. Right.
We went from riding high at the London Palladium Theatre to a year later having 3 of us having a Christmas dinner at a cheap restaurant.
Sure.
I slipped on ice and almost broke my arm. I had a girlfriend with really bad mental health problems at the time. She was diagnosed with bipolar, and she was very difficult to live with. And basically, I went from living in a penthouse apartment near Chelsea to moving in with my sister's spare room. And like, I mean, I just genuinely thought I was out. There was even a moment that I could sell the company for a small amount of money.
Yeah.
It was like 300,000 exit on a £4 million a year business.
Right.
2 payments of 150K. That's what I thought I was exchanging on. And on the day that the guy was going to exchange on that, I get a phone call that he's not showing up because he's gone into hospital with a heart attack.
Wow.
And I'm like, what is going on?
What else could happen? Yeah.
Right? And I'd mentally checked out, and I'd mentally started spending the next. That I thought, okay, great, I got 250 grand payments coming in.
Sure.
That solves a bunch of problems. And now it's like, nope, you've still owned that business and you've got all the problems.
I think sometimes though, when these things happen, without be sounding too kind of like hippie-ish, they do happen for a reason. And I think sometimes we need that kind of check to go, hang on a second, you know, am I really as successful and in tune with things as I should be? And I think they then make you stronger and more resilient and more aware for the next. It's almost preparing you for the next level, I think. What do you think to that?
Well, yeah, because I get to now, and you know, we're about to head into a crazy recession, right?
Yes,
like the shit's going to hit the fan.
100%,
right?
Yeah,
2023 is going to be, you know, like the 2020s is just crisis after crisis after crisis. But strangely, because of some of the stuff I went through in the GFC and all that sort of stuff, there's several frames of reference that I have now where it's like, I know I can handle this stuff. I know I've got way more options than I think. I know that this stuff is never as bad. Like the good times are never actually as good as people make out, 100%. And the bad times are never actually as bad as people make out. So there's those frames of reference that I've got there, and
I think it's important. I see that like an American football field. There's a Carl Jung thing. I don't know if you study psychology, where he came up with this concept where treat your life like an American football field. There's two end zones. There's an end zone of depression, darkness, and you're in this shit. And there's the other end zone where you're flying. You got all the money, abundance, and love. It's actually not good to be in either of those end zones for too long, because either you get complacent, or you get too kind of. And it's kind of like almost just going with the flow, right?
Yeah, and the pendulum always swings back the other way. So
exactly.
Like I've had the high times of loads of money, loads of travel, loads of parties.
Yeah.
Where like walking on water type
Sure.
thing.
Absolutely.
Oh boy, does it swing back fast.
Oh.
And also even in the moment it swings. Like there are times, like those times attract a lot of crazy. There's all sorts of craziness going on. You know, when we were flying with this young dynamic company, like everyone was hooking up and new relationships, new fallouts.
Yeah.
You know, we'd go to the office on the weekend to enjoy the air conditioning on a hot day. And, you know, there was one time I walked in and the team had decided to get together and have a magic mushroom ceremony. And I've got my entire team tripping balls in my office.
Wow. That's funny, but also like, you know, what do you do with that? How do you deal with that?
Well, you've got to wait.
you can't do immediate.
There's not a lot. There's not a lot you can do in the moment.
No,
you've got to have a conversation with them later.
Not to show too many facial expressions. Yeah. Brilliant. So I've got a vision of that in my head now. So talk to us about your kind of like mistakes and the biggest bad call you've made. Would you say?
The biggest bad call I made was at a very low point after the GFC. I was sitting there, one of my really great long-term business partners, he was at a very low part of the end zone, right? He was down and he said, I'm going to walk away from the business and I'm going to head to Bali and I'm just going to spend some time in Bali and get my head straight. There's not a lot I can add to you. And he'd been sort of like in a semi-depression state. He'd been one of the best performers and then he'd kind of really hit him hard that the business had come off the boil.
Okay.
So we were, as I say, million pound quarters in our first year and then, you know, some amazing things were happening. Anyway, in that low moment of him leaving and the business going badly and all this sort of stuff, I turned to this friend of mine, good friend, and I just wanted someone to be in this with me. And I cut a deal where he would own 30% of the company. Yeah. And basically we'd be partners. And I put no clauses in there for performance and I put no bad levers or any of those sorts of things. Wow. So it was just like, let's do that.
Based on trust.
So you can see where this is going to go. Yeah. So basically he meets someone and they get married and that relationship completely changes the dynamic between the two of us. He becomes one of, you know, some you know how you've got some friends who get married and you wouldn't actually know, like in the office, it just doesn't, you might have had an experience with a friend where their relationship doesn't spill over into their work life. The two things are completely separate.
Or there's the other end of the scale when it definitely does.
So he was on that end, right? So he was like,
wow,
100%. Like he couldn't. He like they were John and Yoko, right? John and like a proper. Like we don't separate ever.
Right, joined at the hip, literally. Yeah.
So, and the creativity went out the window. The chemistry between us completely.
Wow.
Yeah. So the whole thing.
That's a huge like change, isn't it?
Massive change. Yeah. Right? So it was just. We tried every which way to twist it so that it could try and make it work, and it just got worse and worse and worse. So eventually it got to the point where we just had to part ways. But at that point, rather like for me personally, if that were me, that I'd taken a chunk of equity of a company and hadn't actually, and I'd let my personal life kind of make it a thing.
You wouldn't live yourself.
I'd just walk, right? I'd be like, hey, look, it hasn't worked out, right? So I'm a walker. It's like we either make money together and there's a big payday and we split it and we're riding high and we've achieved something. And because we expanded the pie, fabulous.
Got you.
Or I'll just happily walk away and I'll go start something new, right? So that's my attitude. He didn't have that attitude.
Dug his heels in, right?
He dug his heels in and said, "Okay, so that 30%, here's the full retail rate for that."
Wow.
So we had to have a negotiation.
It's the air of either arrogance or kind of like, it's almost a disrespect.
Well, I think it's just being, it's the it was their it was the there were more people involved in that decision than just him. So so maybe he might have done that as a bachelor, but he wasn't going to do that.
So what would the Score app say about you? What's your behavior like?
Mind you, that was a long time ago, right? So,
Yeah.
What would my personality test be?
Yeah. Well, if have you done the assessment on yourself?
Yeah. Well, the Score app software is thousands of assessments, right?
Yeah,
we now
of
have
course.
2,500 different assessments on there. We got like, are you ready to run a marathon? And are you ready to
Oh, right. Okay.
buy a house? And are you ready to be a parent? Take the health and wellness scorecard, take the emotional resilience scorecard. So like people create their own scorecards on the platform and then they launch them. And so Score App is a beautiful landing page, a questionnaire, and a dynamic results page.
Got you.
So that's the main guts of it.
Yeah.
And it's a big lead generator. But I get what you're saying, which is the personality testing ones. Extrovert. Versus introvert. I'm terrible at keeping secrets.
So what are you? Which one are you?
I'm extrovert.
You're actually okay, right?
Yeah, and intuitive versus the other one. So essentially, I'm off the scale in terms of creativity and creative thinking, and I'm really good at starting stuff, but I need people around me to finish it. So
I think that the big thing I'm getting from you and from this is the word awareness. I think that's such a powerful leadership skill, right?
Yeah, we have embedded that into our culture. So we run something called an awareness list.
Okay, right.
In all the businesses. So the awareness list is we teach all of the team, if something keeps popping up onto your awareness, you need to talk about it.
So what do you think your biggest limitations are? Where do you feel that you let yourself down?
My answer to everything is go start something new in business, right?
Right. Okay.
So I love new stuff. I'm a first million guy. So
Yeah.
I love the 0 to million thing. And I need to have people around me to professionalize in order to scale. And I need to be really self-aware that I'm a disruptive force, which works really well in the beginning and doesn't work so well after we're up and going.
So like it's a bit like the start to finish or completion thing.
I'm not the implement.
Right.
I'm not
aware
the
of that, right?
Yeah,
which is really important. So what is your purpose? Why are you doing what you're doing?
So there's layers to it, but my work purpose is develop entrepreneurs who stand out, scale up, make a dent in the universe. What I want to do is work with businesses that make positive impact. I love entrepreneurs. I love entrepreneurship. I think the world changes for the better when entrepreneurs have their hands on things.
Totally agree.
I love the idea that entrepreneurs see a problem and then think about how they might create a scalable solution to that. The world's got so many problems right now, and
definitely.
entrepreneurs, like just literally as I was walking in here, an entrepreneur was pitching us to get onto an accelerator, and their idea is to eradicate the plastic waste out of the dry cleaning industry. And the dry cleaning industry has huge numbers of those clear bags that they go through on every time you get a shirt done.
Yeah.
It comes with a massive single-use piece of plastic. So they're eradicating that, and they're coming up with a reusable solution and all this sort of stuff. And this is what I love about entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
They're seeing something that they don't like, and they're going, I'm going to go and fix that. I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to change that, and we're going to get rid of 1 billion plastic bags.
So it's doing something new. It's keeping the dial pushing forward, and you might get a business to 10, 15, 20, 30 million, and that kind of almost doesn't excite you anymore. And you're going to do it again.
Well, for me, I've built a business that works with lots of people who are starting things.
Right.
So,
okay. Right. Yeah.
So the Score app is solving the biggest problem they have, which is lead generation. So having worked with thousands, 3,500 entrepreneurs, they all struggle to get into a position where they have a steady stream of leads.
Mm-hmm.
The first mentor I had when I was 19, lesson number 1 that he gave us was everything's downstream from lead generation.
Sure.
So he basically said, if you can't generate a lead, it doesn't matter what else you've got going on.
Yeah.
Everything is downstream from lead generation. And lead generation is your first and biggest problem to solve in the beginning. When we did the first business, which was the roadshow business, Triumph and Events,
Yeah.
when we would talk to the companies that wanted to scale, they had put millions of development into the product and they couldn't scale because they couldn't get leads. And we would then do these roadshow events and we'd solve the lead gen problem for them and we'd end up with huge commissions for solving that one problem.
Mm-hmm.
So Score App is about the whole scaling up part, stand out, scale up. Dent is about making a dent in the universe, positioning a business to solve a meaningful problem, and then getting yourself out there as the voice of that problem and solving it and talking about it. So for me, my whole purpose is develop entrepreneurs who stand out, scale up, and make a positive impact. And if I'm doing that, I'm very happy. All my businesses relate to that.
You're getting the money and the rewards, but I sense you're getting a lot of fulfillment out of watching people grow as well, right?
Yeah. Well, here's the fun thing about money. It's actually not fun. I know this will sound so weird, and you might have experienced this or seen some of your clients experience this, but it's very stressful to get a chunk of money at one time. What do you do with it?
Yeah.
Right.
It's a sense of kind of like anticlimax because like, also what I'm going to do with it. Also, what am I going to do with my life as well?
Yeah. So here's what you end up thinking. You go, okay, I need to buy a big house, and now we've got to go looking for houses and negotiating houses, which is not something I normally would like to do. And then you go, okay, I'm going to get some investment properties. Now I've got to go negotiate mortgages and tenants and renovations and developments. I'm going to stick a whole bunch into like Vanguard, and now I need to worry about the stock market going up and down and all this sort of stuff. So I know this sounds such a spoilt brat
I understand
kind of
what
thing,
you're saying.
but the point is that you go from being this passionate entrepreneur who's skidding through by the seat of the pants, having adventures, to being a capital fund manager who's the most boring asshole in the world, trying to
staring at a spreadsheet all day,
trying to figure out how not to lose this priceless vase that you've been handed.
Lack of purpose then, because your purpose is kind of like it's one of them, isn't it?
You're now a fund manager.
Yeah.
So the funny thing is that you've really got to have this whole fun and purpose thing figured out, because when if the money does show up and you've got no purpose, it doesn't necessarily make you happy. You end up as a fund manager, which you never intended to be.
It's a fascinating conversation. We're reaching sort of the last few questions on this, but I want to go back into kind of the social media aspect of things, how that's evolved over the last 5 years, but also talk about vulnerability and authenticity. And I think the power of your own story. So you're an extrovert, but I mean, I've built my brand on LinkedIn and other platforms by telling my story and being reasonably vulnerable. What's your take on this kind of stuff? And I think as well, some people have used the mental health card a little bit too much in a disingenuous way. So all that kind of stuff. What's your views on that?
Big topic. I think two things. Number one, if you enjoy being vulnerable publicly, that's one thing. Most people don't, but if it works for you, that's be aware that you may or may not like that. Number two, does it actually build your brand or does it harm your brand? So some people are very good at telling their story in a vulnerable way, in a way that's also very attractive, and for whatever reason, their business and the way they tell the story, it attracts business. I've also seen people who have shot themselves in the foot with vulnerability publicly because they didn't tell the story in a way that actually makes you want to work with them. They tell the story in a way that makes you go, oh, okay, I better
steer clear,
right? So it's reduced the number of opportunities. So then they feel ashamed. Oh, I shouldn't have said that, right? Oh, what have I done? I've gone and shot myself in the foot. So if it's working for you and it's bringing you clients and you're enjoying telling the story, then it's a positive thing. But the flip side of that is that it could actually make you feel ashamed and it could make you feel worse. So one thing that almost never backfires is having an inner circle, a private group of people that you talk about your decisions with.
Sounding board.
And that's,
it's important.
My business partner in Australia, we have the kind of relationship where we can say the worst things to each other, as in like, I'm feeling really flat today. I'm sick of this thing. I would happily walk away from it all, right? We can go right to the we can mentally go to that
You need that shit,
low
man.
point. And we do that for each other. So we talk about the highs, the lows, but it's private. And I've also got a few private friends where I will say, hey, I'm thinking of doing this, or I'm really frustrated with this particular person. How do you think I should handle it? So I have those private chats. So if you're unsure about being publicly vulnerable, just know that being privately vulnerable never backfires. That's if you can put together a group of people, there's no downside in that.
So when have you been the most vulnerable?
When have I? Well, it's mostly in these forums that I put myself in, where I'm with people who I know that they will understand the highs and the lows, and we just totally open up.
Is that mainly based around sort of not imposter syndrome, but doubting yourself in business, or have you had personal vulnerability as well with relationships or that kind of stuff?
It's fairly constant, as in there's always a high and a low of the day. When your business is flying, there's always some personal issue going on, and when your personal life's flying, then there's always some business issue going on. And if you get to a certain size in business, the most annoying thing about being at a certain size in business is that on any given day, there's something that's great and there's something that's shit. I've had experiences where we've been winning a major award and we've been dealing with a fire that's like urgent and expensive.
Sure.
And it's like, isn't it ridiculous that on this day, I'm literally going from this shitty meeting to collect an award for being amazing.
Yeah.
And it's like, this doesn't feel right.
It's a complete paradox. You can't be happy and sad at the same time, but you kind of got to be almost.
I know. There's always something to rain on the parade.
Yeah.
No matter how, because at a certain size, it's always good and bad.
But you wouldn't have it any other way, right?
No, I'm fine with it, right? So for me, I've separated my own ego from the business is its own identity, and I'm my own identity.
Okay. So you've got a podcast, right? And you've had Jay Shetty on there. How did that come about?
Jay has a mutual friend with me, a mutual mentor friend, a guy called Thomas Power, and Thomas rings me up one day and said, "Dan, you got to meet this guy called Jay. He's blowing up on Facebook. He's got to see his eyes. He's got blue eyes, and he's Indian, and he looks amazing."
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? So he says, "Meet this guy Jay. He's going to build a personal brand." So I catch up with Jay a few times, and like, this is completely before he's blown up, and we start talking about things like writing a book, that he should write a book, and we start talking about like, what did he learn from Monk World, and like, how would he bring that in?
Cool.
And we start having conversations about perhaps he should do like a monk assessment, and like some of those early ideas. I mean, he led those conversations, and I helped sort of bring it out, but we were like having some good chats, and then he blows up. But what's nice with Jay is he just, he remembers people, and he's a great guy. He's a lovely guy. He got slammed with this ridiculous video about him doing quotes that he didn't attribute or whatever, and it's ridiculous. He's always, for as long as I've known him, he's been attributing stuff, and there's been the occasional one, and there's also he's done a thing where he's done videos that are almost like a slam poetry, where he strings together quotes.
But isn't that all content creators do that? You've got to start somewhere, isn't it?
Yeah, and and some of the stuff that they pulled him up on, was like he had a team in India running his Twitter account. And they were just pulling stuff and posting stuff back when he had 1,000 followers. Right. And now, they were, and he had outsourced it for a few months, and then it wasn't working, so he brought it back in, but it's still there. So anyway, but look, the thing with Jay is he's amazing. His book is great. He's a lovely guy behind the scenes. He's thoughtful. He is who he says he is.
Sure.
Yeah, really cool guy.
So what kind of pisses you off about social media? I mean, I think that the more following or followers you get, or the more successful you are, the more kind of trolls and aggression and hate you get as well. I mean, that used to piss me off. It doesn't anymore. But with yourself, what pisses you off about kind of social media in general, do you think?
Social media in general, it feels a bit like a treadmill. It feels like you just, you're always on it, and I frustrate myself with like checking my phone first thing in the morning or last thing at night, and I know that I should have a digital sunset now before bed and all this kind of stuff. Yeah,
it's hard though, right?
And it's like, I just need to have that last little touch of
dopamine.
I just need that. What's people saying on LinkedIn?
Yeah.
So like, the endlessness of it is, I don't want to criticize it because social media has created the ability for conversations to happen without geography. The world I enjoy could never have happened, right? Let's just be real. I live in a time that had I been born at any other time, I'd be a farmer or a soldier or like some ridiculous thing. Most of my life would have been based on geography, and if I was born in Geelong in Australia, I would have lived in Geelong and died in Geelong. I would never have had an awareness of what conversations go on around the world or different cultures or different ideas. I wouldn't have had as much disruption or distraction, but I'd live a very sheltered life. Today, I have a global business. We've got an amazing global team. We've got incredible people in the Philippines, and we've got people all over the world. We've got a team in Canada. We've got a team in Australia. We've got clients all over the world. And none of it's possible without this. So, yeah, it's shitty. It's got its downsides, but on the whole, I'm pretty stoked that I was born at the right time for
100%.
for all this happening.
So on the kind of last few points, in terms of the global businesses that you've talked about balance. I call it harmony. I think you said you've got 3 kids. They're quite young. And you've obviously got a wife. How do you harmonize and balance your life?
I think really boring routines. A big part of it's boring routines. Every night is bath time at 6:30, and dinner time is at a certain time, and and we're in routines. And my wife and I are great at. We know that we're in a phase of life with young kids. We don't put the pressure on ourselves to like live glamorously in terms of like for example, the last 3 years we've holidayed 2 hours down the road. So, we live in London, we go down to the South Coast pool and we stay for 2 weeks.
It's lovely
on the
down
beach
there, yeah.
Now, my wife grew up in Switzerland with an apartment in Ibiza. And she's traveled the whole world and I've traveled the whole world. So it's not as glamorous as what we would like to do, when we were just a couple. It's like, let's duck over to Lake Como and stay at a really great hotel. But, with little kids, getting them through an airport.
Mate, I mean, I've done the Maldives and all exotic locations, but when I take my kids camping, they absolutely love it, and it's about that, isn't it? And also, I think you can actually love it more than that yourself as well. Yeah.
So just enjoying the chapter that we're in, that we're not trying to hold on to the previous chapter, and we're not trying to rush through to the next chapter. We're just enjoying. This is the chapter called having little kids.
Yes.
Which means we embrace routine.
It's a big point on that point, because like I think when you start blurring the fact, if you're having dinner with your children and you're on your phone sending an email, it's just you're killing both of those things.
Yeah,
it's about just segmenting things.
That's a great distinction. You're not doing either one of those things well. So yeah, for me, I try and work between 9:30 and 5:30 most days, and I try and not do anything. One of the ways that I do have balance, and this is something that I think more people should probably do, is I've got an assistant, Susie, and I talk to Susie about what I'm trying to achieve in the next quarter. And I basically talk about what's a priority and what's not a priority.
Yes.
And then, now I say yes to everything. If you contact me directly and it's like, oh, this person just wants to pick your brains for an hour. Okay, all right. Right. So I'll say yes to stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas Susie will go, that's just not a priority. Sorry, he just doesn't have time for that. Or he just can't do that at the moment. I'm really sorry.
Sure.
I don't even know about it. And I'm glad I don't know about it, because I'd freak out, because I hate saying no to people.
And that's about just having the right people. You're only as good as the people around you, right?
Yeah. So even when I've been at a really low point financially, I've always had an assistant. And my diary gets filled up through my assistant. And the only way that I'm doing, like all of the stuff that I'm doing for the week is already in my diary.
Sure.
And I'm turning up and all the notes are in the diary. This is what you're doing
And it's
today.
already been filtered to maximize
It's already been filtered.
Yeah.
So,
important.
and that's important, because I know I'm self-aware that I'm not good at filtering for myself, because I just hate saying no to people.
Yeah, you almost like don't want to let someone down.
I don't want to let them down. I just like meeting people, and I always see the bull case or the upside in. Oh, well, what if they're amazing? What if What if?
So just quickly then, before we go, have you got 4 books on the go at the moment? Is that right?
So I've written 4 in the Entrepreneur Journey series. I co-authored a book called How to Raise Entrepreneurial Kids, and co-authored a book on What's Your Business Worth, which is about valuation.
Nice.
And then the new book that's coming out is called Scorecard Marketing.
Yeah.
So we're going to be giving away about 10,000 copies of that over the next 6 months. And that's really, it's the strategy playbook for how to do a scorecard marketing campaign.
Just quickly, how many businesses have you helped exit so far?
I'd have to work it out.
It's a good number that you can't remember. That must be a good number. And that's good.
No, I've been, because we've had 3,500 clients and a lot of them have wanted to exit, and I've been an advisor on lots of deals.
The thing is, though, what I found is there's no blind science. There's no kind of like, this is how you do it. I think every single transaction it's a framework, but every single transaction is different, right?
Yeah. And and for anyone who's not exited before, you imagine that exiting a business is like selling a house, that it's really simple and there's straightforward and there's a process, and that this person's going to buy and this person's going to sell and they're going to exchange. And a business is nothing like that. You know, there's earn-out periods, performance clauses,
100%.
there's aligning interests. You might have 3 or 4 shareholders who each technically have this percentage.
Yeah.
And the ultimate exit deal might look nothing like that. This person might be walking away.
Yeah.
This person might be sticking around. And ultimately, you need to align to whatever the acquirer wants.
There's a lot of factors, but also you might have a number in your head. The chances of actually achieving that number are very rare. And I think that there needs to be a margin to go, actually, look, there's 10% under what I wanted. You know, sometimes you've got to take the money as well.
Yeah, you've got to take the deal that's available.
Yeah.
Because it's mostly, depends. There are ways to orchestrate a bidding war.
Yes.
And that's the best case scenario. You know, if you can have 3 or 4 companies that really want that, like WhatsApp sold for 19 billion or whatever it was because Google and Facebook were not going to let the other one have it, and they bid it to the stratosphere.
That was a perfect scenario, wasn't it?
Right, perfect scenario.
Yeah.
Because then you're in a complete, but in many cases, you're not in that scenario, and you're in a negotiation rather than a bidding war.
So finally, sort of going back to that 18, 19-year-old, 21-year-old self, that sort of age, what would you do differently?
Get into software earlier.
Right.
Get in. Go befriend Mark Zuckerberg. There's this guy called Mark Zuckerberg.
Hindsight's wonderful. Yeah.
Jump on a plane. Go be his friend.
Yeah.
No, but on a serious note, I'm really happy with the journey and the way things have turned out. There are obviously, with the perfect benefit of hindsight, I would have taken courses on negotiating. Right. I would have gotten mentors better, and I would have probably paid them. And I would have gotten an NED, someone who's been through the whole journey before, and is actually somehow bonused up on the kind of aligned result that I want. I would have definitely developed software. All right, I know that I would develop intellectual property, media, and software earlier, because ultimately your business is going to be valued on your intellectual property
100%.
and your technology
and the quality of it as well.
Yeah. So, and you're going to have to go through several learning cycles. So you might as well get the first terrible one out the way. But if you take all things being equal, if you take a business that is a services business, but it has its own little bit of proprietary software, even if it's only got 100 subscribers to that, or it's got or it's using that technology with that could be the difference of a selling for 7 times EBITDA versus selling for 5 times EBITDA. So, you might get 2 years worth of profit just simply because you did some R&D. You might have got an R&D tax break anyway. So, that and it also might be the difference between getting a deal and not getting a deal.
Sure.
Because when they say, how does this business run without you? And you say, actually, the technology does a lot of work.
This is right, because it's a little bit of a fallacy that the most important thing is people. People are important, but it's the IP, the data, and the operations, all that kind of stuff is, without that, you haven't got business anyway.
Yeah. The people are important, like in the same way that if you had lumberjacks cutting down trees, obviously you need a lumberjack to cut down a tree. But if they're working with axes or if they're working with chainsaws,
of course.
Right? So it's like if you can develop chainsaws, then the lumberjacks they only have to be 16 years old. They don't have to be 28.
100%. I mean, some of these big tech firms, like multi-billion pound firms, have got like 4 people in them.
Well, Instagram sold for $1 billion and it had 13 people.
Yeah.
So, but you can underpin, those are extreme examples, but you can underpin any business with a bit of proprietary tech and some data and, some media. Like you can have a media archive of media assets.
100%.
Those things make a huge difference on
You
exit.
repurpose lots of things these days as well, right?
Yeah. And when you even also on the people thing, until you've got 40 or 50 people, they don't really take you seriously as having people anyway, because they'll sit there and say, well, half the team's going to leave when you leave. You've got 7 people and you're the fearless leader.
Yeah.
Of course, they're all going to follow you to the next venture.
You've got to make yourself redundant as well.
Yeah.
I think a lot of CEOs don't see that, or they're too scared to.
That self-awareness, right? There's a good chance you were probably really good at starting this thing, or you were really good at solving a particular problem that the business needed solving at the time. But there's a really good chance that a grown-up
get out of your own way.
Yeah, there are grown-ups.
Yeah.
Here's the one thing too. You don't need to necessarily hire a COO who used to be a COO of a big company. In many cases, you can hire someone who used to be a store manager at McDonald's, or who used to be a bank branch manager, or used to be running a call center doing 3 million.
With a fresh perspective, right?
But they're very hands-on. They're very, they do smooth operations. They have performance meetings with every member of the team once every 90 days.
Yes.
They keep dashboards. When someone sends when someone sends a snarky text message, they screenshot it and put it in their file.
They're on it.
Right? They're on it. Yeah. And then when that person becomes problematic, they bring out their file and they go, look, here's what's going on.
100%.
And they don't end up in a HR claim. They're just good operators. Entrepreneurs aren't like that. We just move in too fast to do any of those sorts of things.
Yeah, we don't want to be bothered with all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So whereas you get a few people who I'd call the grown-ups, and the faster you can get a few grown-ups and get that entrepreneurial energy is like a fire. It needs to be in a fireplace or it burns the house down.
Yes.
Right. So
totally. That's a really good analogy. I love that.
Yeah. So you need to know about yourself that maybe your whole purpose in the business now is to be wheeled out at the annual conference.
Yeah.
Right. And bang your cymbals.
And that might be enough.
That might be enough.
Yeah.
Maybe it's once every 90 days you G up the team with a bit of rah-rah. Yeah. Or maybe you write a book, or maybe you go on podcasts.
But don't get experts in and tell them what to do. And, don't give someone responsibility and then micromanage them the hell out of them.
Yeah. I always think about the army. The army have got all these guys who they just literally send them into a war zone and say, these are your missions. This is the mission. Get on with it. You've got 120 people. Make sure they don't die. That's your mission. Go get that done. And then they let them get on with it. And I think to myself, God, if they can let 25-year-olds do that, like I don't need to micromanage people to run a simple business like mine where no one's getting shot at.
Brilliant. What a fascinating conversation. Absolutely thrilled to have you on board. Hopefully we can become good friends and support each other. I mean, I'm sure the audience will be very chuffed to hear what you said today.
We covered a lot of ground.
Yeah. Before you go, what's one piece of advice you want to leave the audience with?
The most poignant thing at the moment is that we look like we're sailing into a storm, and it's going to be a shit storm. So the piece of advice I would say is have a sentence printed out somewhere, tattooed on your arm that says, that's not for me, right? And when the news comes on at the night and they're talking about the national issue of the day, just go, that's not for me, right? I've got nothing I can do. There's nothing I can add to that conversation.
Yes.
It's not my business. It's not there's very little that I'm able, that's out of my control. So that's not for me. When you're on social media and there's US politics, you go, that's not for me. And then there's some like woke debate versus a conservative opinion debate, and you're sitting there going, oh my goodness, I can't believe that side believes this. And right, just go, that's not for me. And just simply, there's going to be so much negativity and noise in the next 12 months.
100%.
And it's going to, if you engage with it, it's going to bring you down. And what you'll miss is that this is a great time. There's more money in the economy than ever before.
Opportunity.
Inflation is too much money. That's the definition. The definition of inflation is too much money looking for a home,
right.
Looking for something to go into. There's more talent available than ever before. There's incredibly talented people scattered all over the world looking for opportunities.
Sure.
There's more technology that's available for free or almost for free. There's more investors looking for investments that aren't going to tank. or emerging opportunities. This is the greatest time to be alive. You wouldn't want to be born at any other time. This is it. This is the magical moment. This is an incredible time in humanity. But the only downside of the time that we're in right now is that every issue of the day can find its way into your pocket. And you just have to get disciplined around that's not for me.
Having that mindset, conserving your energy and focusing on what you can control. Love that. Thank you for today. Brilliant to have you on.
Pleasure. I loved it. Cheers.